Chapter 19, A Bit of Mischief. Ronduin's father had said,
"Let's sit down and you can tell us all about what you figured out."
but when they entered the kitchen, his parents did not sit down at the dining table. Instead, they joined Cook Agnes by the fire, which crackled so loudly that Ronduin could not hear their words from where he sat waiting at the table. Ronduin watched the gray and white kitchen cat, named Meow, just under the edge of the table, eating the last bits of food in her bowl. He put his hand down to pet Meow as she walked by, but she darted to the side as if to say, "How dare you try to touch me?" Ronduin was not surprised. Meow had always been a standoffish cat. Now she jumped onto the windowsill and glared at Ronduin. He felt like she was saying, "A cat that is so noble, that has one green eye and one blue eye, does not agree to be petted by a mere boy." Ronduin's parents and Cook Agnes showed no sign that they were ready to eat breakfast. Ronduin was tired of waiting for them. He wanted to tell his parents about his dream. He wanted to explain how the bowl was like the cider spill on the table. He wanted to explain why the floodwaters continued to rise even after the rain stopped. Ronduin's mother raised her voice so Ronduin could hear her ask a question in spite of the crackling of the fire. "Ronduin, did you say the water is higher today?" Ronduin got up from the table and walked quickly to the hearth. "Yes, it's about a half a step higher," he said, holding his hands out to show how much the water had risen. Cook Agnes said, "And the water had already risen at least a step higher than when Sir Andrew left." Ronduin's mother said, "When the water is a step and a half higher here, it's also a step and a half higher in the village."
"That much extra water won't really affect us,"
said Ronduin's father.
"But I wonder about how it might affect the people in the village."
"Sir Andrew told me that the water level at Ricard's farm was close to flooding the goat yard," said Agnes, the cook. "I know that farm. A step and a half more water means the goat yard is totally flooded. The house and their garden are higher than the goat yard, so they are still dry."
"Didn't Sir Andrew say that Ricard's family invited another family to stay with them?"
asked Ronduin's father. "Yes," said Cook Agnes. "It's the baker's family. They have little twins and a boy who is older than Ronduin. Ricard's family has a boy about the same age as the baker's boy, and in Ricard's family there's Mirabelle and 2 younger children." Ronduin counted all the people who were living in Mirabelle's house. He counted on his fingers as he imagined each person. Mirabelle's family has 4 children, and the baker's family has 3 children, and there's Mirabelle's parents, 2 more, and the baker and his wife, 2 more, and Sir Andrew is staying there too. "The house is very small," said Cook Agnes. "Just 1 room with a sleeping loft. It's smaller than this kitchen." "And they have to fit 12 people?" said Ronduin, who could not picture so many people in such a small house. "At least they get to go outside. We can't go outside here, except on the balcony with the chickens," said the queen. "I had a dream about Mirabelle," said Ronduin. "It helped me figure out why the water is rising." Cook Agnes stopped stirring the porridge, looked at Ronduin, and said, "I've been wondering about that too. Why does the water keep rising even though the rain has stopped?"
"If the porridge is ready, let's take it to the table where we can eat while Ronduin explains,"
said the king. "I need some things to help explain it," said Ronduin, finding a wooden bowl, a small plate, and a larger plate, and a jug of water. He carried these to the dining table. While Cook Agnes served the porridge, Ronduin set the 2 plates on the table with the small one on top of the large one. He held the bowl in his hands. It's like this, said Ronduin, pouring enough water from the jug into the small plate until it filled to the top of its narrow rim. Imagine this is the normal amount of water in the lake, he said, pointing to the water filling the plate. Now, a big rainstorm continues for many, many, many days. It falls on the lake and it overflows everywhere, said Ronduin, pouring more into the small plate until it overflowed into the bigger plate with a deep rim. This is the lake overflowing. The rain also falls on the mountains and fills the area called the bowl. Ronduin had filled the bowl and held it above the plates. Now it stops raining, continued Ronduin, but the bowl in the mountains drains very slowly because it comes out through a small crack in the rocks. Ronduin slowly poured water from the bowl into the small plate, which overflowed into the big plate, filling it to almost the top of its thick rim. See? The floodwaters are rising, even though the rain has stopped. Cook Agnes, the Queen, and the King nodded their heads.
That's exactly what happens,
said the King, smiling. Then why did the floodwaters eventually go away? Asked Cook Agnes. Ronduin thought for a moment while he finished pouring the last drops of water from the higher bowl. Well, he said, the river that flows out of the lake will eventually carry the extra water to the sea. Suddenly, Ronduin felt a bit mischievous. Like this, he said, quickly tipping the plate so the water spilled toward the floor and could be heard splashing below. His mother lifted her legs and barked in a shocked voice, Ronduin! Cook Agnes called out, Stop! But Ronduin laughed, as did his father. The King's place at the table allowed him to see that Ronduin was not spilling the water onto the floor, but was simply pouring it into the empty bowl that belonged to the cat. Chapter 20. Ronduin peered out his bedroom window very early in the morning. It was light enough that he could see birds floating below his window, but it was still dark enough that he could not tell whether there were ducks or seagulls. Then, suddenly, a loud quack told him that the birds were ducks. They bounded into the sky and climbed high enough to be lit by the first rays of sunshine. Ronduin watched the ducks flying toward the forest. The last he saw of them, they appeared to be over the part of the woods that Ricard had pointed to one time when he told him about their little homestead. How I wish I could fly with those ducks to Mirabel's house, thought Ronduin. The ducks looked down and saw a little house sitting on an island in the flooded forest. Here, the door opened, and a young girl named Mirabel stepped outside and heard loud quacking in the sky. She carried a wooden bucket that held 3 fat turnips. Mirabel saw the sky brighten and then turn pink. Now that the day had fully dawned, she was able to see that under the shade of the trees, water still covered the forest floor. She carried the bucket around to the back of the little house. Oh my, she thought, as she looked at the goat pen with the green boat tied to it. Yesterday, the goat pen was mostly underwater, and today it's completely flooded. How can that be? That the water has been slowly rising for days, even though the rain has stopped. Good thing the gate was left open so the goats could get out. Mirabel saw right away that the goats, Daisy, Bluebell, and Firefly, had left their wet pen and had clambered up onto the woodpile. She tossed the 3 turnips on the ground, and the goats climbed down and began chomping on them. This gave her a chance to take hold of the rope collar around Daisy's neck. Mirabel led Daisy to a big stump. Daisy jumped up on it with the turnip still in her mouth. Mirabel sat on the smaller stump and began to milk the goat. The milk shot in steady streams until Daisy decided she had given enough milk and jumped off the stump and climbed back up on the woodpile. Now Mirabel looked across the flooded goat yard to where the trees parted in the forest. She was looking at the opening to the path that her family traveled to walk to town, the same path she had run home on so many times after running with Ronduin after school. Now the path looked like a river through the trees. I wonder where Ronduin is now, she thought. I wonder whether he's upstairs in his house because his farm has water up to the first floor windows, or maybe his farm has a house like ours that has a bit of dry land to walk on. Thinking about running with Ronduin caused Mirabel to wonder whether their small patch of dry land might just have enough space for running. I could run around and around and around the house, she thought, but not with the milk bucket. First, I have to keep that safe from the goats, and if I take it inside, I'll be given a job to do, and I won't get to run. Mirabel opened the garden gate and set the bucket down next to a kale plant that already showed yellow flowers. I would pick those flowers to bring some beauty into the house, she thought, except that would mean this kale would make fewer seeds. Mirabel stepped out of the garden and wrapped the rope around the fence post to secure the gate. Then she ran along the back of the little house, past the goats who looked at her with curiosity. She slowed for the corner and then ran through the wood chopping area. She slowed again for the corner to the front of the house, then ran by the front door, slowed for the next corner, and ran towards the flooded goat yard, reaching the backyard. Mirabel stopped. She realized that she had never reached top speed in her loop around the house because she had to keep slowing down for the corners. But even though I can't run at top speed, she thought, it's still running, and it's still a miracle I'm out here alone. Mirabel took off again, past the goats, around the corner into the wood chopping area, and around the next corner and toward the door, and suddenly she stopped. Her mother had just stepped out the door, following her little brother, Merrick. And then the mom from the baker's family stepped out, followed by her two little twins, followed by Mirabel's sister, Adelaide, and their older brother, and the baker's son. The small yard was full of people, and not everyone was outside yet. Mirabel heard laughter from inside the house. It was her father's voice speaking, and Sir Andrew and the baker laughing. Mirabel turned back and walked through the wood yard to collect the bucket. There would be no more running today. Chapter 21, A Sack of Peas. Ronduin did what he did every morning. He woke up and looked out the window. He gazed across the wide lake that hid the fields. He imagined Mirabel's house in the forest. He found his inside-out trousers and brought them to the window, where he admired his mother's tiny stitches before he turned them right side out and put them on along with his linen shirt. Next, Ronduin tied his jump rope around his waist and picked up the food bucket and the water jug. He found his way to the balcony to feed his chickens. Sunset ran to the far end of the balcony the second Ronduin walked through the door. But sunrise always came right up to him and, as usual, allowed him to hold her. He dumped their water, filled their food bowl, and placed some straw and 2 perfect eggs in the bucket. When he returned to the hallway, Ronduin put the bucket and the jug on the floor. Then he untied the jump rope and jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped some more. He jumped by 2s and 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, and thought about learning 7s. Next, Ronduin wove his way through the third-floor hallway and the second-floor hallway and went down the stone stairs to the first floor. Here, he checked the water level. He noticed it was at the same level as the day before, and the day before that. It had stopped rising, but had not yet begun to fall. Next, Ronduin joined his parents and cook Agnes in the new kitchen. Here they ate porridge and drank water from drinking horns that had once been the horns on cattle. Then they talked about their tasks for the day. Ronduin said, "I have to bring new straw to the chickens." The queen said, "Your father and I will go to the well for water. We are blessed with a well that is in the castle. The well in the village is underwater, and Sir Andrew must carry water from the well at the Ricard's house to all the homes in the village. Ronduin, please stay here until we return with the buckets of water. We will need your help to pour the water into the jugs." The king and queen left to draw water from the well. Ronduin stayed in the new kitchen with cook Agnes. He reached into his pocket and took out his almost completed project. 2 squares of red cloth sewn together. "Can you spare some peas for my throwing sack?" he asked, showing cook Agnes his carefully stitched square. "Certainly," said cook Agnes. "Take all you need from this big sack." "Thank you," said Ronduin, opening the sack of dried peas. Ronduin reached his hand deep into the bag of peas and pulled out a few handfuls of little round orbs and half-orbs. He placed these in a bowl. Now he looked at the peas in the bowl in one hand and at the small square sack in his other hand. How, he wondered, would he get the peas through the small hole in the sack? "Are you going to turn it before you fill it?" asked cook Agnes. "What do you mean?" asked Ronduin. "It will look nicer if you turn it inside out," she said. Ronduin understood what she meant right away. He remembered the careful stitching he had noticed on his trousers. He knew from looking at them closely that his trousers had been sewn while the inside was on the outside. Then, when the sewing was done, all of the raw edges were hidden when the visible stitching was turned to the inside. "It would make the sack look better to put the seams on the inside, just like my trousers," said Ronduin. "But I only left a small part of the seam unsewn." Cook Agnes handed Ronduin a wooden spoon with a long, narrow handle. "You can use this to push the cloth through the opening," she said. Ronduin held the opening in one hand and pushed a bit of cloth through it. Slowly, bit by bit, with the help of the spoon, he was able to feed all of the cloth through the small hole. He took the sack and smoothed it on the table. It looked neat and tidy, with the seams on the inside. "Now," he thought, "I can fill it with peas." Ronduin reached into the bowl and took a pinch of about 5 peas. He poked these through the hole in the sack and then took another pinch. After adding many pinches of peas to the sack, he lifted it and noticed that it still felt almost as light as a feather. "This will take me all day," he thought. "How," he wondered, "can I fill the sack faster?" Just then he heard noises in the hallway, and then the queen and the king entered. Ronduin had never before seen either parent wearing a yoke across their shoulders. Now he was surprised to see that each of them wore a wooden yoke. At both ends of each yoke hung a bucket of water. Cook Agnes rushed to the queen to help her set the buckets down, slowly and carefully. Ronduin helped his father set his buckets on the floor. Now Cook Agnes reached under the cooking table and pulled out a large metal funnel. She placed the small end of the funnel into a jug, and she held it in place as the queen poured water into the jug. Ronduin, brought an empty jug to his father, and, when Cook Agnes was finished with the funnel, he took it and put the smaller end into the second jug and held it in place as his father poured water through it. Each bucket held enough water to fill 3 jugs. Ronduin set aside 1 jug to bring upstairs for water for the chickens, and the remaining jugs were set under the cooking table. And that's when he saw something under the table looking dusty and forgotten. A drinking horn, broken on the pointy end. It was a broken kitchen item that had not yet been thrown away. But Ronduin did not see something broken. He saw the perfect tool to solve his problem. He carried the broken horn to the eating table. Here, his incomplete project, a mostly empty red sack and bowl of peas, waited for him. Ronduin lifted the sack and discovered that the broken pointy end of the horn just fit into the small opening. Cook Agnes saw his plan right away. "Do you need some helping hands?" she asked. Ronduin nodded, and she took the red sack and the small end of the horn in her hands and held them together tightly. "Ready?" asked Ronduin. Cook Agnes nodded. Ronduin slowly poured the peas from the bowl into the wide end of the horn, where they slowly flowed through into the sack. Cook Agnes gave the horn a couple of shakes, and then the sack was full of peas. "That worked well," said his mother.
"You've invented a funnel for peas,"
said his father.